I begin with a prayer. On Monday 10th March, while lifting up prayer for this ministry, Yah intervened and spoke to me. He gave this instruction: pray this prayer in the next teaching, referring to this teaching. The prayer begins with his words: My people perish for lack of knowledge. Because of their ignorance, they are led astray. They are ensnared in lies and deceit of the fallen one, Hashatan, and his people, the synagogue of Satan. End quote. I continue with the prayer as I wrote it, as led by the Spirit. But by these teachings, Kadash, Father, I pray that you bring light into their darkness. Your light, Father, light which darkness cannot comprehend and the darkness cannot overcome. You are in the business of truth and justice, in the business of presenting indisputable evidence in order to rescue your sheep that lay desolate in the traps of the hunter, the enemy. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Mercy and truth go before your face. Darkness has been dispelled by these teachings. Your truth, O Yah, has prevailed, and your sheep have been set free from the chains of complex deception and lies. Now they can walk with their heads held high. Now they can pursue you, seek you with all their heart, in spirit and in truth. In this moment and time, as you reveal all your truth, Father, through your servants scattered all over the world, the sheep will listen, the goats will love the lie and hate the truth that could have saved them. You will harden their hearts and hand them over to a strong delusion, simply because they would have it so. Selah. Welcome back to part 3. This is the Jews and the Beast of Revelation 13. In this lesson, we will cover the following. 1. The Holocaust. With documented evidence, logic, and witnesses, we will examine the validity of the Holocaust of the Jews. 2. We'll see that the Jews have been the practical enforcers of Revelation chapter 6 and 13. The beast of Revelation 13 is empowered by Satan, the dragon, to control the whole world and bring it into subjection to the Luciferian agenda through complex deception, subterfuge, and eventual domination and control. Revelation 13:14b. He deceived all the people who belonged to this world. Finally, we will look at anti-Semitism. What is the motivation behind it? We will look at a few individuals who were given this label and examine whether Jews and Jewish institutions were justified in labeling them so. Many history revisionists have claimed, with reasonable proof, that the Holocaust never happened. One such person is Arthur R. Boots, the author of The Hoax of the 20th Century, the case against the presumed extermination of European Jewry. He admits that, like many Americans, he too once believed the Jewish allegations of German genocide against them via the use of alleged gas chambers. In his own words, in common with virtually all Americans who have had their opinions formed since the end of World War II, I had, until not very long ago, assumed that Germany had given the world a particularly murderous outburst during World War II. This view has ruled Western opinion since 1945 and earlier, and I was no exception in accepting the essentials of it. He explains, I see 3 principal reasons for the widespread but erroneous belief in the legend of millions of Jews killed by the Germans during World War II. 1. The US and British troops found horrible piles of corpses in the West German camps they captured in 1945. 2. There are no longer large communities of Jews in Poland. And 3. Historians generally support the legend. During both World Wars, Germany was forced to fight typhus, carried by lice in the constant traffic with the East. That is why all accounts of entry into German concentration camps speak of shaving of hair, showering, and other delousing procedures such as treatment of quarters with the pesticide Zyklon. That was also the main reason for a high death rate in the camps and the crematories that existed in all. When Germany collapsed in chaos, then of course all such defenses ceased, and typhus and other diseases became rampant in the camps, which quartered mainly political prisoners, ordinary criminals, homosexuals, conscientious objectors, and Jews conscripted for labor. Hence the horrible sins which, however, had nothing to do with, quote, extermination or any deliberate policy. Moreover, the West German camps involved were not the alleged extermination camps, which were all in Poland, and which were all evacuated or shut down before capture by the Soviets, who found no such sins. The final solution spoken of in the German documents was a program of evacuation, resettlement, and deportation of Jews with the ultimate objective of expulsion from Europe. During the war, Jews of various nationalities were being moved east as one stage in this final solution. The legend claims that the movements were mainly for extermination purposes. End quote. In speaking of the Holocaust evidence, he says, "What we are offered in evidence was gathered after the war, in trials. The evidence is almost all oral testimony and, quote, confessions. Without the evidence of these trials, there would be no significant evidence of extermination. One must pause and ponder this carefully. What trials needed to determine the Battle of Waterloo happened, the bombings of Hamburg, Dresden, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, the slaughter in Cambodia. Yet this 3-year program of continental scope, claiming millions of victims, required trials to argue its reality. I am not arguing that the trials were illegal or unfair. I am arguing that such historical logic as the legend rests on must not be countenanced. Such events cannot happen without generating commensurate evidence for their reality, just as a great forest fire cannot take place without producing smoke." End quote. The number often given is 6 million Jews. 6 million Jews were annihilated during World War II. Documented facts, however, show that Jews claimed this same number of deaths for more than a century and for several decades before World War II ever occurred. The book, The First Holocaust, The Surprising Origin of the 6 Million Figure by Don Hedesheimer, claims that all demographic studies given often tend to have so many logical, methodic, and systematic flaws that their results simply have to be rejected. He states, "But if it is true that we do not have a reliable demographic study that shows without a doubt that 6 million Jews lost their lives during World War II, then why are we confronted with this 6 million figure? Where does this figure originate? And when was this figure first propounded?" End quote. Dr. Joachim Hoffmann was the first mainstream historian to point out that the chief Soviet atrocity propagandist, Ilya Ehrenberg, had published the 6 million figure in the Soviet Foreign Press as early as January 4, 1945, that is, 4 full months before the war's end. At the time, no demographic figures could have been made available to him. The chaos reigning in Europe at that time rendered any demographic study impossible. Evidence points to this figure originating far earlier than 1945. The phrase 6 million Jews was used in the media or by politicians and the like at least 253 times after 1850 and before May 1945, which is when Germany surrendered, marking the end of World War II. I'll mention some of these instances. 26th January 1891, The New York Times. Russia's population of 5 million to 6 million Jews, about 6 million persecution and miserable wretches. 11th June 1900, New York Times, quoting Rabbi Stephen S. Wise. There are 6 million living, bleeding, suffering arguments in favor of Zionism. 31st October 1911, New York Times. The 6 million Jews of Russia are singled out for systematic oppression and for persecution due to the process of law. December 10, 1911, New York Times. Conditions of the Jews in Russia worst in history. The Russian government is making the 6 million Jews a people economically exhausted, a people without any rights at all. 11th September 1912, American Jewish Yearbook. Russia has since 1890 adopted a deliberate plan to expel or exterminate 6 million of its people for no other reason than that they refuse to become members of the Greek Church but prefer to remain Jews. 11th September 1912, Rabbi Stephen S. Wise is quoted in the New York Tribune, page 9. Russia is now asphyxiating the Jews. It does not dare to offend the nations by blood spilling, so it is slowly but surely grinding out the lives of 6 million Jews. 10th July 1914, The Jewish Criterion, Pittsburgh, page 9, where 6 million Jews are suffering. 2nd December 1914, New York Times, page 12, Appeal for Aid for Jews. The plight for 6 million Jews, where over 6 million are in the actual war zone in Poland, Galicia, and the whole of the Russian frontier. 19th March 1915, The Jewish Criterion, Pittsburgh once again. How the casting of 6 million people into the deepest abyss of servitude and outlawry is to relieve tension we cannot understand. 26th September 1915, The Boston Sunday Globe, page 46, a quote from Jacob Haas. Indeed, the only point that all warring elements are agreed upon is that at the end of the Holocaust, Jews and Palestine will be more closely related than at present. 5th March 1916, New York Herald, section 3, page 10. 6 million Jews, old men, women, and little children, are suffering from the greatest calamity that has befallen Israel since the Egyptian bondage. 28th June 1918, The Columbus Jewish Chronicles, page 1, claims Palestine has room for 6 million. Quote, it is quite possible for Palestine to find room for 5 to 6 million. 800,000 hectares will suffice to produce food for 6 million people. 18th October 1918, New York Times, page 12. 6 million will need help to resume normal life when war is ended. Committee of American Jews lays plans for the greatest humanitarian task in history. 6 million Jews need help. 5th April 1919, The Galveston Daily News, page 5. 6 million Jews are dying of starvation. Same newspaper on April 6, 1919. American Jewish Relief Committee is endeavoring to save from starvation 6 million Jews who are the helpless victims of German terror. 12th November 1919, New York Times, quoting Felix M. Warburg. The Jews were the worst sufferers in the war. The successive blows of contending armies have all but broken the back of European Jewry and have reduced to tragically unbelievable poverty, starvation, and disease about 6 million souls, or half the Jewish population of the earth. 20th August 1920, The Ogden Standard Examiner, page 9. Push drive for Jewish relief. Mr. Bond declared today that there are 6 million Jews in Eastern and Central Europe whom the war has left dependent on America. 2nd January 1922, The New York Call, page 2. Jews meet here January 15th to plan campaign for $6 million for relief. 29th June 1925, Lawrence Journal World, Kansas, page 5. Jewish National Fund invests almost $6 million in Palestine. 15th March 1930, The Daily Times, page 5. Will raise $6 million for upbuilding Palestine and to rehabilitate Jews of Eastern Europe. 29th March 1933, New York Times. The Joint Distribution Committee is now active in relief and reconstructive work in Eastern Europe where 6 million Jews are involved. 1st June 1933, New York Times, page 6. Dr. Margoshes said he had received a letter from the poet at Zurich a few days ago, stating that she had, quote, run away from the Holocaust. 21st September 1933, The Jewish Western Bulletin. At this period of human persecution and of human destruction, when life, especially Jewish life, has ceased to be of any value in the cruel land of bloody Germany, when the lives of hundreds of thousands are tortured and hung in the balance during this Holocaust. 6th March 1936, the Kabbalist and Zionist Jacob D. Haas, B'nai B'rith Magazine, The National Jewish Monthly, Volume 50. 6 million Jews live and are affected by this omnipresent fear of another world war. November 25, 1936, a statement by Chaim Weizmann, president of the World Zionist Organization, testified in front of the Peel Commission. It is no exaggeration to say that 6 million Jews are sentenced to be imprisoned in this part of the world, speaking of Palestine, where they are unwanted, and for whom countries are divided into those where they are unwanted and those where they are not admitted. 31st May 1936, New York Times, page 14. Americans appeal for Jewish refuge. The petition, in expressing the opinion of enlightened Christian leadership in the United States, favoring a larger Jewish immigration into Palestine, stressed the intolerable suffering of the millions of Jews in the European Holocaust to save the unfortunate millions from total annihilation. 2nd June 1936, the Jewish Western Bulletin, page 3. Great Britain has within her power to throw open the gates of Palestine and let in the victimized and persecuted Jews escaping from European Holocaust. 16th June 1938, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, page 18. Judge Lewis urged American members of the race to swing moral and financial powers into the channels of evacuating some 6 million Jews to Palestine. 6th October 1938, Turtle Mountain Star, North Dakota. 5 or 6 million Jews, uprooted by dictatorship and tossed about by economic storms, may have to depend upon the development of the Holy Land under British mandate as a solution to their difficulties. But they face the hostility of the Arabs living there, whose economic and religious interests conflict with theirs. 22nd November 1938, The Times. Mass immigration of the Jews to Palestine for 2 years and the formation of a Jewish National Assembly was advocated by Sir John Haslam in a message in which he sent to a public meeting at the Kingsway Hall last night, held by the New Zionist Organization. The message stated that the problem now involved some 6 million Jews. 18th January 1939, The Binghamton Press, page 8. Irish plea. Deputy Robert Briscoe, only Jewish member of the Irish Parliament, arrives in New York City to begin a campaign to enlist Americans in a plan for resettling 6 million Jews in Palestine. 27th January 1939, The Canadian Jewish Chronicle. Only 6 million Jews at the moment remain safe, but they will have to carry the burden. 31st January 1939, The Daily Sentinel, page 11, a statement by John Perez of the Rome Popular Front in Rome, Oneida County, New York State. Does Mr. X really believe that if Hitler gains control of Spain with the help of Franco, that life in Spain will be any different than it is today in Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia, where 6 million Jews have been murdered? What this person was asking was about 6 million Jews who were already murdered even before Hitler rose to power. September to October 1939, Contemporary Jewish Record, Volume 2, Number 5, published by the American Jewish Committee. The coming war would be the annihilation of the 6 million Jews in East and Central Europe. 30th October 1939, Syracuse Herald Journal, statement by Samuel Bronchek, page 15. In Poland alone, there are 6 million Jews who are now subject to Hitler's persecution or Stalin's communizing. 20th January 1940, Mason Globe City Gazette, Iowa, page 16. Mr. Tannenbaum stressed that Palestine offered the only solution to the 6 million Jews who are homeless, starving, and sick in Central and Eastern Europe today. 1st November 1942, The Palestine Post. The chief rabbi, who spoke on behalf of the Empire Jewry and the Jews of the United Nations, as well as of all the 6 million Jews in Europe, said that the deliberate extinction of the whole house of Israel was being carried out by Hitler's sadists on a scale beyond compare even in the annals of Israel. 1942, The Massacre of a People, What the Democracies Can Do. The following article is an excerpt from Let My People Go, a pamphlet written on Christmas Day 1942 in London. Of the 6 million Jews or so who were living at the outbreak of the war in what is at present a Nazi-occupied Europe, a high proportion, between 1 and 2 million, have been deliberately murdered by the Nazi and the satellites. Unless something effective is done, within very few months, these 6 million Jews will all be dead. 25th January 1943, the Canberra Times. Jews are being subjected as part of Hitler's plan to exterminate 6 million Jews in occupied Europe. 25th to 29th September 1944, United Electrical, Radio and Machine Workers of America Convention proceedings. Whereas history records no parallel to the bestial cruelties inflicted on the Jewish people of Europe by the Nazis and their satellites, whose coldly calculated program of extermination of all European Jews very nearly succeeded, almost 6 million Jews having been murdered in cold blood. 28th November 1944, The Leader. Russian Black Book lists German crimes. The first volume of a 5-volume Russian Black Book recording the documentary form of the German massacre of approximately 6 million European Jews has been completed by the Soviet State Publishing House. The 5-volume work is under the general editorship of Ilya Ehrenberg. I hope you can trace the meticulous and systematic propaganda to occupy Palestine, to present Jews as helpless oppressed victims forever in need of the aid of Americans, and the villainizing of various countries, initially Russia, but eventually Germany, of quote, killing 6 million Jews, without any substantial proof. I also found it quite interesting the manner in which these articles described Jews' suffering. They used phrases like systematic oppression, economic exhaustion, and slowly but surely grinding out the lives of 6 million Jews. Now, if you've already caught on to what I'm trying to say, you can see how the Jews describe their suffering is exactly how true Israelites have been facing oppression over the course of their lifetimes. When slavery and colonization were abolished, oppression took on a new mask and became institutionalized. Death-enabling policies against the Hebrews were implemented, locking them out of any opportunities that would result in any substantial progress. This they did institutionally by producing their deaths through poverty, capitalism, and classism. Through organized politics such as neocolonialism and neo-slavery were death-making conditions that descended into the everyday lives of the Hebrews. Think of the capitalist stigmatization of the poor, the privatization of proper healthcare despite it being a fundamental human right, the demanding of their labor yet rendering it invisible through erasure and devaluation. Throughout their lives, they remained imprisoned and enslaved in fatigue and impoverishment. In the aggregate, Hebrews bore a disproportionate share of capitalism's propensity to work its workers to death. Now, this type of suffering is what many of these articles said of the Jews, who, by contrast, are actually one of the most powerful and wealthiest groups in the world. So what prolonged suffering are they talking about? The 6 million figure has no solid demographic research to substantiate it. Yet, it is a criminal offense to question the Holocaust. In Germany, Austria, France, and other European countries, to voice mere doubts of the Holocaust is punishable as a felony-level crime, and there have been literally thousands who have been imprisoned for writing forensic analysis, carefully reasoned and well-documented articles which contest the party line on such issues. It is evident that the Jews seem to have a fixation for the number 6, a 6-pointed star for the flag, a 6-day war for their, quote, liberation. 6 camps were the alleged death camps, which begs the question, what is the significance of 6 million? Some have suggested that the 6 million figure stems from the Jewish ancient religious prophecy in the Torah. According to some sources, the prophecy envisioned that before Jewish people could reclaim and reconquer Palestine to establish a Jewish homeland called Israel, 6 million Jews would have to first perish in a fiery burnt offering, aka the Holocaust, as a sacrifice to their God Yahweh. In practical terms, however, what the Holocaust is big business for the Jews. It offers this multi-layered solution for which they can receive illimitable funds for their agendas and not be questioned on what the funds are used for. Israel directs the foreign policy of the United States and other countries. Billions in foreign aid, military help, grants, outright gifts, loans, reparations, quote, reparations for supposed crimes, have flowed in one direction toward Israel ever since the Second World War. I quote Moshe Leshem, a prominent American Jewish lawyer. He said, "Israelis and American Jews fully agree that the memory of the Holocaust is an indispensable weapon, one that must be used relentlessly against their common enemy, the non-Jews. Jewish organizations and individuals thus labor continuously to remind the world of it. In America, the perpetuation of the Holocaust memory is now a $100 million a year enterprise, part of which is government funded. Books with Holocaust themes, documentaries, feature films, TV programs, memorials, and museums are a staple of America's cultural diet." I conclude this bit with a quote from Arthur R. Boots. He wrote, "This may surprise the reader who regards the tale of Jewish extermination as a near certainty. Such is simply not the case. There are many considerations supporting this view, and some are so simple that they may surprise the reader even further. The simplest valid reason for being skeptical about the extermination claim is also the simplest conceivable reason. At the end of the war, they were still there." Another book titled Operation Baby Boomer, The Khazarian Con of the 20th Century, holds the same claims but with far clearer evidence. Although authored anonymously, I think this book is well worth our consideration because it gives us far more insight, not just into the Holocaust hoax, but also into the Khazarian Jews being the practical enforcers of the beast system of Revelation 13. The author sheds some light on his background. He says of himself, 1. He was the son of an undercover FBI agent. 2. His father belonged in the Office of Naval Intelligence during World War II. 3. That his father was both a Knight of Columbus and a Knight of Malta, but most significantly, his father was a high-ranking Freemason, operating at a level well above the 33rd degree. He later found out that his father belonged to multiple secret societies, but rather oddly, but not entirely unexpectedly, pledged fidelity to Catholicism, Judaism, and Talmudic roots. 4. His mother was a CIA agent who was intimately involved with the Sicilian Mafia. Apparently, this is one of the most notorious criminal organizations in the world. 5. That his parents knew of the plots to assassinate JFK, MLK, and RFK before the US government-directed murders ever took place. They had foreknowledge too of the state-sponsored deaths of Marilyn Monroe and Malcolm X. Finally, that as a child, he'd been used for many life-threatening drug experiments, without his knowledge of course, but with his father's full consent. Regarding the Holocaust hoax, he explains that in his time as a finance officer in the US Army, he deliberately requested an assignment in Germany in the early 80s. "I did so because I was on a very serious lifelong mission to find out what World War II was all about, especially, quote, the Holocaust." This pursuit eventually led to his incarceration in a mental ward and his getting dragged against his will for what he'd found out. He writes, "That confinement took place immediately after a German civilian who was assisting me in my intensifying research project about the Holocaust gave me that very thick binder which contained an original photo of the top 100 leaders of the Third Reich. What made that binder of dossiers such a radioactive acquisition is that it proved that there was never a final solution to exterminate the Jews. Rather, that there was a highly organized scheme to trick Ashkenazi Jewry across Europe to flee to the Zionist state of Israel. The Holocaust, as we were taught in America, simply never took place. As a matter of historical fact, The entire patently false narrative was initially fabricated to scare the Jews living in Europe so they would mass migrate to the Zionist state of Israel, which they did. Having spent much time in many a German guest house, I came to find out that there were no death camps anywhere in occupied Europe. They were all set up as labor camps, not concentration camps, designed to squeeze labor out of its inmates of every race and religion, nationality and political persuasion, not just Jews. Then, toward the end of World War II, when food and medicine became scarce and supply lines broke down throughout German-occupied territories, those labor camps were the first to experience rapidly deteriorating conditions, which led to the death and sickness of many. In other words, the Jewish inmates were never deliberately killed by anybody, as they were way too precious to the well-concealed Zion-Nazis at the very top of the Nazi leadership, who wanted them all shipped to the soon-to-be established modern state of Israel. After all, that was the only way they could steal Palestine from Palestinians, via systematic occupation of the territory. End of story.
You see, Germans put their prisoners to work to replace the German working men sent to France for the war effort. But Jews will put our kids through endless drivel about showers, gas chambers, fire pits, and the absolutely preposterous 6 million, all of which haven't a single shred of evidence to support the fables. But who needs proof? Monuments to genuine American heroes have been swapped for shrines to the Jewish dead. And embalming Jewish corpses into the minds of Gentile kids mummifies American history into discarded coffins instead.
Indeed, when it comes to the Holocaust, and I'm not original there, we can see that the Holocaust has become a religion, according to a very famous Israeli philosopher, Yeshaya Leibovich. Jews believe in many different things, but all Jews believe in the Holocaust.
That's right. It's a religion.
And it's a religion. It's a religion with clerics, with congregation centers, museums, and so on and so on. And I say, fine. If it's your religion, it's all fine. It's becoming now a Western religion. If it is your religion, I claim my right to be an atheist.
We are not trying to downplay the seriousness that anybody died, but you just said, for example, we ought to have enough evidence. That's enough. Case closed, that's enough. Forget about your questions. Let me say one thing, and let me present something to you. How, for example, do you come back at the two forensic studies that have been done, the supposed gas chamber buildings at Auschwitz and Majdanek, which proves forensically, and the first one was conducted by a man from Boston named Fred Lucher. Fred Lucher had built execution equipment for American prisons, and he was very good at it, and he was recommended for that job. But the second forensic report was done by the people who run Auschwitz, the people who run the Auschwitz Museum, and it proved that there could not have been cyanide gassings in those chambers. How do you come back at that?
Des centaines de milliers de juifs, peut-être quelques millions, on ne sait pas vraiment. Le chiffre a été fixé arbitrairement par le tribunal de Nuremberg, dont on sait pour les historiens que c'est un tribunal de vainqueurs. C'est-à-dire, les vainqueurs imposent leur loi aux vaincus. Il a dit, le tribunal de Nuremberg a décidé que ça sera 6 millions par le gaz et basta.
The government. What do you hate about the government?
They're a bunch of liars.
Both sides, left and right?
Yes.
Is there an example of that you can think of off the top that really pisses you off?
Well, they insisted Hitler was bad, and he was not.
You don't think Hitler was bad?
No, not at all. There was no Holocaust.
Okay, well that was wow. This was a left turn. I did not see that coming. So what makes you think that?
I've seen evidence. My Aunt Georgie was in a prison camp, and she told me about it, and there was no torture, there was no killing.
In a Nazi prison camp?
Yeah.
She was
a Jew in Germany.
And she told you that there was no
torture, there was no murder. They had films, they had an orchestra, they had movies, they had a soccer team. A Jew started the SS.
And I am Jewish from my mother's side, though entirely Jew, because you know that there is no half Jews as far as the mother is concerned, because Judaism is entirely inherited from the mother, not from the father. So I belong to a very important international Jewish family by my mother. And I've been very interested, and my only passion, except the piano, is truth. That's why, in spite of the way my congenials treat you, I don't want to take part in this real absolute lie, because I've been working on your case and for his own case these last 6 or 7 years, and I know that the problem, for instance, of the Holocaust is the complete fake, because it's very easy to know, because it's a simple technical arithmetic problem which could be solved by a child in high school. Now, any chemist knows that you can't gas people with cyanide acid. It's called like that in English, hydrocyanic acid. Hydrocyanic acid, 1,000 or 2,000 people at a time. It's well known, and even the most important American Jewish newspapers, like the American Jewish Yearbook, said that there was 3,003,000 Jews in occupied Europe in 1942. So I don't see how they could have killed 6 million Jews when there was only 3 million.
My name is Henry. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm here today to answer the question, why do I support open debate on the Holocaust? When I was 39 years old, I met a man while taking a break from Yom Kippur services who informed me that Israel was the 4th mightiest military in the world. Having been raised in a family which touted the miracle of tiny Israel against the hordes of Arab terrorists, I rejected his claim. Then I checked him out and found to my astonishment that he was right. This led me on a long-term quest to find out what other pieces of information have been denied to me. I'm now 70 years old. I traveled to Palestine and found out that these supposed terrorists were actually extremely decent people who cared for their foreign visitors. They did not teach their children to hate. They just wanted to live their lives the way I live mine. I wanted to share my experiences in Palestine with the Jewish community of my town. All 3 rabbis rejected my request to address their congregations. I then began a peaceful pro-Palestinian vigil in front of the same Zionist synagogue on whose steps this quest for truth originated. This has turned into the longest active street protest that Ann Arbor has witnessed, over 12 years. The Jewish community has done everything in its power to get us to leave. To date, their efforts have netted 0, although it would merely require them to remove the Israeli state flag from their sanctuary. I then watched a video of Ernst Zundel and his struggles with the Jewish community in Toronto, and I realized I was a tiny version, far less knowledgeable, far less brave, of Ernst himself. My friend Dan and I traveled to Mannheim, Germany, to attend Ernst's trial and to visit him in the Mannheim prison. Toronto's Jewish community painted Ernst as a monster, but I found him to be warm, genuine, peaceful, and ebullient. Once again, vital information was withheld from me, and I became aware that the constant thread running through my activism was my opposition to mendacity. Why do I support open debate on the Holocaust? Because I want to know what happened and why it happened. Because I resent manipulation, and I feel manipulated and threatened when decent people like Ernst, David, and Germar are locked up for expressing what they believe.